Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that's a little bit darker than the things that we usually discuss, but I think it is important for us to really get this out in the light in order for you to decide if Alaska is going to be the best fit for you and to, in order just for you to fully understand everything that goes along with moving and living in Alaska. And just as just a bit of a warning, this topic's a little bit darker than what we usually discuss. So if you have any children that do watch this channel, you might just decide whether or not you want them to watch this. Maybe go through it first, make sure the content and everything is what it is that you want them to be hearing. And just make sure that you as the parent kind of make that decision. Before we jump into this, my name's Jamin. I'm an associate real estate broker in the state of Alaska. My mission is to help you to build an intentional and significant legacy for yourself and your family by coaching in real estate. And the purpose of this channel is to really give you the full, honest look at what it's like living in Alaska and not just give you some airbrushed fantasy land about what it's like living up here. We want to actually show you what it's like living up here and just not sweep the inconvenient dark sides of living up here under the rug. So without further ado, let's go and jump into today's video. Suicide really is the silent killer up here in Alaska. It is actually the sixth cause of death in Alaska. And matter of fact, Alaska has the second to worst ranking in the entire United States for suicides, with Montana being the only state that actually ranks higher than Alaska. Just to give you an idea for just how much more Alaska is above the national average, per 100,000 people, about 27 of them actually commit suicide in Alaska compared to the 14 per 100,000 in the lower 48. Alaska Natives as a group actually do have the highest incidence of this, being at about 52 suicides per 100,000. And if we look more at kind of the regions, just looking at the raw numbers, we do see South Central Alaska, so Anchorage and the Matsu Valley, being the areas where that's where most of the suicides are going to occur. Looking at 2008 to 2017, we actually see that there was about, I think it was 915 deaths by suicide of about the 1,700 total deaths for the area, which isn't that big of a surprise because that's where most of the people do in fact live. Just looking at the specific areas though, we do see that the more remote you get, the more higher this statistical number of people who are going to commit suicide. Because we looked somewhere like Nome, it's actually about 73 people out of 100,000 do commit suicide, which is, about 5 times the national average. But anytime we get such a smaller sample size as what we're going to see in kind of these remote areas, we're naturally going to see a much higher statistical display that's going to be displayed once we do, in fact, see those numbers come to light. So that's not a particular surprise. So if you read these stats, one of the things that I'm sure you're going to be wondering to yourself is, why is this happening? Why are we seeing such a really high number of suicides going on in Alaska? Well, couple reasons. Number one, it is such a smaller state than we're going to see with other people. So statistically, yeah, anything that happens here, it's hard to compare it to the rest of the lower 48 just because we are such a smaller state. But that does not fully explain why we're seeing such a high level of suicide up here. So let's talk about some of the projected reasons as to why that actually is. So one of the biggest ones right off the bat is about 80% of those who are successful in committing suicide are men. Okay, so this kind of anecdotally makes sense because when men are struggling, they do not usually have the social networks in order for them to share their struggles and have other people kind of come alongside them. That's just not something that most men have the luxury of having. Most of them kind of have the mentality that they would rather die on their white horse than let anyone into the fact that they're actually struggling with something. And, that unfortunately is just part of the culture right now. And I do see it's something that's changing, but that is very statistically significant that about 80% of the successful suicides that I saw, according to the statistics, are men, and that's something that's very significant. The next thing that we see is just the environment. So it's no big surprise that Alaska is cold and it's dark, and for a lot of people, this is just not going to be a factor and it's never going to impact them. But for those who are impacted by the cold and dark, if they find themselves in this environment, then it can be a real dangerous spot. And it's something that you're just not going to know which category you fall in until you get up here. Another factor is going to be isolation. So this can either be physically isolating yourself, or it can be socially isolating yourself as well. When you live up here and you're far away physically from friends and family, and you can see how it's very easy to start isolating yourself, not just physically at that point, but socially as well. And this is really something where if you're struggling, most people do have a tendency to actually try to isolate themselves even more than they normally would. So it's something that you have to be able to identify in yourself and in other people if isolation is happening. Another theory that's been thrown out there is family arrangements. And when they say family arrangements, I'm assuming we're talking more about somebody's personal life and what might be happening in that individual's day-to-day life, which, that definitely does make sense. If you have a lot of stuff that's happening, then that would definitely weigh pretty heavily on you if it's definitely of the more negative variety. And one of the last reasons is kind of an economic motivator. And I'm not exactly sure I'm convinced this is I would like to see kind of the statistics behind that, because we do have plenty of people who aren't billionaires and got the absolute, the world's not their oyster. They're not making millions, and they're not committing suicide either. So I'd have to see more information on that to really decide if that's a determining factor or just something that's associated with the act of committing suicide. So this has been some of the reasons that we see behind suicide. It's not exhaustive. I'm not a psychiatrist. Not in the mental health field, so I can't really say definitively this or that. These are just some of the reasons that I've seen thrown around out there, and we're going to go ahead and jump into what you can do when you start seeing some of these things developing what do you do when you see some of these red flags in someone else or in yourself. But before we do, we're going to go and take a break real quick. All right, so as you guys know, every video I do react to a comment from the comment section. So if you'd like to see your questions answered directly in a video like this, do make sure you put those in the comment section down below, and so I can go ahead and respond to it. So today the comment is, this individual is giving a kind of some tips for people that are looking at moving up here. And I think he's got some good ones. So he said, my tip, before you start applying or interviewing for jobs, get a bid for movers to relocate you to Alaska. It's shocking the cost to move your household goods and your automobiles to Alaska, enough to keep one from even moving. So their bid was about $45,000 for a 3-bedroom, 2 automobiles, and we don't know what to do now at this point. So this is really why I encourage everyone who's considering moving to Alaska. You might want to actually go just downsize as much as you possibly can. And I know everyone's like, oh, we don't have anything we don't need. You probably got a lot of stuff you don't actually need, okay? You don't fully get an appreciation for what you don't need on a regular basis until you've made a move to Alaska and you really go, okay, well, I had all this stuff and it was just sitting in the dark in a closet down here in Virginia, and now I moved it all the way across in the country just so it can sit in the dark in another closet in Alaska. And really the best thing you can do is just consolidate down it to as few things as you possibly can when you're looking at making a move up to Alaska. So that's going to be our comments for the day, and we're going to go ahead and move on with today's topic. All right, now what we're going to be talking about next is what you should be looking out for in people that you know when you're up here, and also just be looking for these signs in yourself. And again, I'm not a mental health expert, and I'm not licensed as a psychiatrist, psychologist, any of that good stuff. These are just anecdotal and the tips that I've gotten from people who have been working in this field. One of the big things that you need to be really watching out for is people who are isolating. Now, this can be challenging because isolation can be pretty good and pretty healthy, actually. Like if you have something that's going on in your life, then you may need just a little bit of space to kind of think and decompress and process and figure out what's up and what's down again. And that's fine and that's normal. What we're talking about, though, is the isolation where you are just completely shutting down and just completely putting your hand up and saying, I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want anyone coming into my bubble. And really just kind of spurning any social connections with other people. And that's that's dangerous. Okay, because once you're in isolation, then you have a tendency to just kind of spiral to the bottom, and it just makes that makes the spiraling to the bottom, the turns just that much sharper and faster as you go down. So really be on the lookout for this in other people and in yourself. All right, now the next thing is going to be numbing behavior. So this can really manifest itself in a number of different ways from my experience. And this can look like you're doing a bunch of just crazy activities like skydiving, or I don't know, a bunch of dangerous activities. That's just the one that came to mind. Or it can look like just being on your phone for a lot longer than you normally do, just for hours and hours, just doing the death scroll on TikTok or Instagram, Facebook, whatever social media of choice is, and just numbing out using that. Or you can be watching a ton of TV or be drinking a lot. Like, there's just all sorts of numbing activities that you can do. But the big thing is just to be able to identify, hey, am I using this because this is what I want to do and this is good use of my time? Or am I using it to avoid feeling something? And if that's the case, that's a flag, and that's something you should pay attention to. All right, now this next one is pretty difficult to identify sometimes, and that is identifying the person who is putting on a show. So if you have someone where they're just kind of a natural person that likes to put on a show, they're an entertainer, or it's really important to them that they maintain this image of being absolutely perfect, they just do that naturally, it's going to be a little hard to identify when they're putting on a show and it's not their normal go-to. So what you're looking for is someone where, they are just outgoing and bubbly and they got it all together and the Midas touch and all this good stuff. And then when you talk to them, they're a completely different person. They're crushed. They can't focus. They're a complete mess. I mean, again, some of this is going to be personality, and some of it is just you need to be able to know that person well enough to go, okay, it's not normal for this person to be acting like this. Usually who they are in private is who they are in public, and there's a big incongruency here that I should probably ask some more questions about. Or if I don't feel qualified to ask those questions, either because I'm not close enough to that person or I don't feel like I need to get a mental health professional, then get whoever it is you feel like you need to have in there to ask those questions. The next thing is going to be if you or somebody has a real difficult time in focusing. So some people naturally struggle with focus. For me personally, I had an experience with this a couple of years ago where it was winter time and obviously not a great time of year for focus and all that, at least in the real estate industry, because you don't have a whole lot that's demanding your attention right now. But I found myself just staring at a wall for like 30 minutes or something like that, just absolutely like transfixed. And I really struggled in being able to focus on anything else. And that kind of scared me a little bit, shook me up a little bit. And that's kind of what I'm talking about. If you find yourself where focus is just really difficult, like willpower is one thing, but it's almost like you don't even have a fair chance at actually focusing, then that's something where there's enough like red light indicators flashing that you should be asking some more questions. Another big indicator that you should be looking for when you're talking with people is, do they have an apathy towards life? And phrases you should be looking for are things like, what does it matter? Life doesn't really have a whole lot of purpose. When you start hearing phrases like that, like big red flags, okay? By the time you hear someone asking stuff like that, it's time to call a professional to get them in there to see what they would recommend at that stage, because once you start getting into that apathy, that's you're about at the bottom of the spiraling vortex that we were talking about before. And last but not least, if you find someone who's being really moody, and I mean, everyone's going to have some kind of mood swings one way or the other, but if you have someone that's acting way out of line with where they normally are and how they react to stuff, like they just swinging from one side to the other, and it's just way more drastic than normal, then that's going to be something you should really look into. So those are things you should look for. Now, what do you do when you identify someone who's in this place or identify yourself as being in this place? Well, one of the big things you can do is go get plugged into an organization up here in Alaska called Hope to Alaska. And what this is it's an organization that grew out of ACF Church in Eagle River. And the whole premise of the organization is that people will go seek mental health if they don't have the barrier of actually paying for it, because those services can be expensive. So what Hope to Alaska does is it actually pays the bill for people who are struggling in these areas to go get the help that they actually need. And this has been really impactful for a lot of people and has saved lives. So if that's something you find yourself struggling with, then you should definitely go check that out. And if you're someone where it's like, it's not really something I struggle with, maybe go check it out anyway, because it's a great thing to donate towards to make your entire state a better place. Just kind of looking and being a little bit more preventative. Get involved with as many groups as you can and make sure that you're engaged with things that really do matter with you during the wintertime, because that can absolutely make the difference between the winter just being a little cold and dark and really you being on the struggle bus for the majority of it. And last but not least, when you're not sure, just go talk to a mental health professional and make sure that you're got your I's dotted and T's crossed. We want to keep everybody here. You've got value just by right of being a human, and you should be here, and you should never commit suicide, and we want you here. So yeah, that's all I got. I'm pretty sure this whole video is probably going to get deplatformed on YouTube just with the subject matter, but make sure that you do get this video, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and we'll see you next time.